Hi, and welcome to the Tao of Hypertrophy. So first of all, I would like to say that this YouTube channel will be dedicated to the hypertrophy nerds. There's a lack of nerd type of channels dedicated to the studying or the science of hypertrophy and fitness in general. So this is my passion, this is my why I'm creating this channel, is to actually have a discussion and have a place for nerds like me to interact and to uncover with me how hypertrophy actually happens. So to kick off this YouTube channel, I want to talk about a little bit of hypertrophy, obviously, but something that I'd like to call the hypertrophy dimensions. And what do I mean by that? Well, Eric Weinstein, when he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, he alluded to the fact that in every great story we have a what, a how, and a why. So what is what happens, how it happens, and why it happens. So applying that to our hypertrophy model, we get what we do to cause hypertrophy, meaning with our training, how hypertrophy actually happens within the muscle fiber, and why it's triggered in the first place. So to start off with type of training, we have resistance training. That is a no-brainer. Resistance training is what causes the most hypertrophy response with all of the type of trainings. Second, we get style of training. Style of training means if you do eccentric work or concentric or isometrics or blood flow resistance type of training. So those are the styles of training that you can implement within the type of training that is resistance training. And last, we have training variables, which are intensity, volume, frequency, whether you train to failure or not, your overall volume. I don't know if I mentioned that already, but those are the training variables within your workout. So those three actually make up the what space. That is what we can do to create or to elicit hypertrophy. The style of training, the type of training, and the training variables. Moving on, we get how. How hypertrophy actually occurs. So, within the how space, we have hormones, nutrients, and cellular pathways. So with hormones, we have stuff like testosterone, cortisol, leptin, insulin, growth hormone. All of those hormones and many more can actually and will control and orchestrate how hypertrophy actually gets done or gets accomplished within the muscle fiber. Moving on, we have nutrients. So nutrients are stuff like protein, amino acids like leucine and glucose, and vitamins and fatty acids like omega-3s. And last but not least, we have cellular pathways. Stuff like mTOR and the androgen receptor pathway and the adenomonophosphate kinases and the mitogenic activated protein kinases and STAT3s and JAK, and all of those cellular pathways control and orchestrate how hypertrophy actually occurs. So that sums up the how space. That's how hypertrophy happens, is within those three little pockets of dimensions: the nutrients, the cellular pathways, and the hormones. And then we get into the good stuff, into the geeky stuff. And that is why we get a hypertrophy stimulus in the first place. So in the why space, or in the why dimension, we get bioenergetics. So bioenergetics actually is very important for the hypertrophy stimulus. Why it triggers the stimulus of hypertrophy in the first place. So, for example, if you take a lot of antioxidants, you actually blunt hypertrophy, because you negate the reactive oxygen species and its properties in enabling or stimulating hypertrophy. So stuff like reactive oxygen species like hydrogen peroxide actually enter in this bioenergetics, which they are not used, although they are not used for energy, the reactive oxygen species, they are a byproduct of the bioenergetic pathways that are being used while you work out, and they actually trigger the hypertrophy stimulus. Other than that, we have calcium ions and hydrogen ions and inorganic phosphate and ATP, and that sums up the bioenergetic landscape. But lastly, but not least, we have biophysics, and that is really what it's all about. So in the biophysics we get stuff like the Gibbs free energy, which you may see here. In that we have the enthalpy and entropy of all of the reactions that occur while you work out and after that to trigger and stimulate hypertrophy. We have stuff like hydrogen bonds and charge and all of that geeky and nerdy stuff that we all love. So to sum up, and now that you know my story of hypertrophy, we have what, a how, and the why. And what is what we can do to trigger hypertrophy. A how is how things get used within the muscle fiber and how things get channeled in the cellular pathways to orchestrate the hypertrophy events. And in the why we have the stimulus in the first place. So the classic view would be hydrogen peroxide actually enables the mTOR pathway to get upregulated and phosphorylated to trigger a net positive balance of protein synthesis post-workout. So I hope you liked this first video, the first ever video of the Tao of hypertrophy. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel so you can get a lot of more geeky and nerdy stuff like this about hypertrophy, and I will see you in the next video.